In reality, death has no meaning whatsoever to comic book characters. However, in the hearts and minds of comic book readers, the demise of a popular character can be a matter of life and sort of death. A comic book death is generally not taken seriously and is rarely permanent or meaningful, except when it is. I'm Ben from What Culture, and here are 10 comic book deaths that angered the world. Number 10. Jason Todd. Batman was plunged into one of his darkest adventures ever with a death in the family. Whilst the tale itself was a fairly enjoyable globe-trotting romp, the kernel of the story was that young Jason Todd would lose his life. You see, the fans didn't like him, and so DC put the death of Robin to a reader vote, and the readers voted to kill him. The media were understandably upset that the comic book publishers had killed Robin off. The story garnered an enormous amount of column inches and anger-fueled debates, considering that it was, in fact, a comic book. Number 9. Aunt May. Aunt May, the dizzy, frail and perpetually worried mother figure of young Peter Parker, had to pop her geriatric clogs sooner or later, and in fact, by the time old Aunt May actually died, the character's roles had pretty much been reversed, and poor old Peter spent more time worrying about May than she did about him. In the events leading up to 1995's Amazing Spider-Man issue 400, May slipped into a coma, ending it all with a genuinely harrowing scene where Peter recalled May reading him Peter Pan as a child, and before he could finish it, she was gone. Maybe it was just too much reality for a fantasy medium, but oh boy, the fans intensely disliked Aunt May's death. Number 8. Wally West. After the New 52 reboot, Barry Allen was the one and only Flash, and Wally West had apparently never existed in the first place. Although his presence had been cruelly teased at a few times since then, Wally West, as we knew him, apparently died the worst possible death a comic book hero can endure. With no fanfare, no variant covers, no commemorative merchandise, and no follow-up issues depicting spandex-clad funeral processions, Wally was simply retconned out of existence. People were mad as shit. Number 7. Martian Manhunter. The general consensus among comic book fans was that the death of Martian Manhunter in 2008 was a fairly pointless one, tacked on at the beginning of DC's Final Crisis event in an attempt to boost sales. Murdered by the villain Libra in the first installment of Final Crisis, many fans were outraged by how easily the Martian bit the dust. He did come back in 2009's Blackest Night as a zombie and ran circles around Flash and Green Lantern though, so at least there's that. Number 6. Superman. The death of Superman was a neatly told event that encompassed 7 issues, culminating in the slobber knocker that was Superman issue 75, where Supes and Doomsday both apparently died from their respective wounds. The true tragedy of Superman's demise, however, was that it taught the bean counters at the parent companies of comic book publishers that death is good for business. It was a key foundation stone for the comics boom of the 1990s, and also shaped today's comics for better or for worse. Number 5. Hal Jordan. Unable to deal with the destruction of his home, Hal embarked on a quest to remake the city he loved. When the Guardians of the Universe and the Green Lantern Corps tried to stop him, however, Hal simply killed them all before adopting the name and identity of the evil Parallax. In DC's 1994 Zero Hour event, Hal went a step further and attempted to rewrite reality entirely. As the universe was nearly wiped out, Oliver Queen, Hal's best friend, shot him through the heart with an arrow. Number 4. Ralph and Sue Dibney. One of the major talking points of Brad Meltzer's identity crisis was the death of Sue Dibney, detective partner and wife of the elongated man, Ralph Dibney. At one point in this tragic tale, readers discovered that Sue had been raped by Silver Age villain Dr. Light, and as if that wasn't enough, she was also pregnant with Ralph's child at the time of her death. Then, she was murdered and burned. Did I mention she got burned? She did, she was burned. Ralph, her grieving husband, lived through an absurd amount of personal torment throughout the following Weekly 52 event before finally dying in what was essentially a glorified suicide. Of course, the pair then returned as murderous zombies during the Blackest Night, which is lovely and makes everything fine. Number 3. Magneto. Writer Chris Claremont did a wonderful job in the 60s of repositioning Magneto as a tortured, layered, and endearingly human character who had a great deal of reasoning and bitter justification behind his fanatically anti-human stance. At the end of the Planet X story arc, the younger mutant generation rejected Magneto, and Charles Xavier once again had the last word. This led an embittered Magneto to murder Jean Grey in cold blood, which prompted Wolverine, in turn, to behead the helmeted bastard. Number 2. Damian Wayne. For a little while there, Damian was everywhere in the Batman books, and the fans, for the most part, loved him. Then, all of a sudden, he was gone. Getting murdered by your own clone is a pretty nasty way to go in anyone's book, but it's especially bad when it's your own mother that tells him to kill you. One poster even wrote that Morrison should be beheaded for his crimes and that his head should be paraded through the streets, which is a normal comic book reader response, and that's fine. Number 1. Peter Parker.
Oh God. good.
What better way to celebrate Spidey's 700th issue than by killing him all dead and stuff? Before all that death and stuff, readers were primed to expect very little from this edition, save for the conclusion to a Dr. Octopus has stolen my body storyline that had been running in the comics up until that point. Instead, Peter Parker never actually got his body back, and in a stunning twist, he died in the arms of his greatest foe, who then promised to become a superior Spider-Man in his stead. Dan Slott, the writer of this controversial tale, ended up on the receiving end of some of the worst fan backlash of all time, even receiving borderline angry tweets from none other than Stan Lee. You crossed a line, Slott. When you get Lee involved, you crossed a line. And that's our list. Make sure you subscribe to the What Culture Comics YouTube channel for more lists like this, and don't forget to visit whatculture.com for daily news and articles. I'm Ben from What Culture, and thanks for watching.